Booyah! Back at you, Motivation Motors, where we have interesting discussions with interesting, intelligent Black people who've overcome adversity en route to prosperity. It's your boy, Quan John. We got Miss Portia Mystique. Say what up, Portia.
Hey.
And we have a very, very interesting, enlightening, a very authentic individual here today. We have Dr. ADRIANE Bradley Gray. She's the principal at Hampton City Public School System. Dr. ADRIANE, thank you for being here. How are you doing this morning?
I am well, and I thank you guys for having me. And I just want to give a little bit of a clarification. I was a principal in Hampton City Schools, and then, once the transition, and we've talked about that with my mom and her health ailments, I had to transition to some other things. But yes, I was. So thank you so much for that.
No problem. No problem. So basically, we're going to get into, we want to grapple, and we want to uncover and unravel your thoughts behind the state of education for Black children specifically. That's what we'll be talking about. All right. But before we get into that, let's get into your journey into being an educator. You know what I mean? When did you say to yourself, you know what, this is what I do. This is what my calling is. You know what I mean? What led to that?
It's very ironic what my calling and how it evolved, because I grew up in New York. I want to say the city of New York, because, sometimes people will say, oh, I'm from New York. And then you say, oh, where? And they'll go, oh, Albany.
Yeah, that's not New York City. Nah. You can't claim that one.
Can't claim that one. Nah. So I grew up in the Bronx.
All right.
Raised. I was born in Harlem Hospital.
Okay.
My mother was a administrator of a child facility daycare center in Manhattan.
Right.
129th, 31st, something along Manhattanville.
Right.
So always grew up there. My father was an engineer for ABC, and his goals for me was to go into computer science, that sort of thing.
Right.
But I spent most of my time at my mom's daycare facility. So started out at Norfolk State University, graduated Catholic school girl, high school, elementary, all the way through. And we talked about that, matriculated all the way through. And then, when it came time to go to college, he wanted me to pursue computer science, and I tried it. Really was not for me, not even a little bit. I think I had and I think we shared, I had like a 1.4 GPA. Couldn't pass, as some kids will say, gas. Couldn't pass gas.
I've never heard that, but
it sounds dope. Gas in any of those courses. And so I had to kind of readjust. And I said, I had two younger sisters. I was always volunteering, always babysitting. And I said, this education thing is really more for me. And, I worked in daycare centers, so forth and so on, and just kind of evolved into that and started out teaching, didn't really even finish my student teaching, got hired immediately out of my student teaching from Norfolk State, started working in Hampton Public Schools, and just loved it. I just really, really loved it. Well, then kind of started to say, I'm looking around at some of my colleagues, and why are they here?
What do you mean by that? Let's really delve into that. What that means? Why are they here? In what manner? What facet? What do you mean?
So I historically have always worked in a Title I school. Right. And for Title I school, let me just go ahead and define that.
Sure.
Very urban.
Right.
Primarily African-American students.
Right.
But what I also found was that we had lots of staff that did not look like the students we were serving. So that for me resonated. And so there was a disconnect between what you're providing and what you're expecting, and not being able to relate.
Right.
So, when we talk about relationships, when we talk about climate, when we talk about culture, all of those things were things that I'm grateful that I gleaned from my mom being in that situation in Manhattanville. in Manhattan, and just kind of seeing her build those relationships to move our babies, but also move our families.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So just kind of took it from there, and then taught for a while and said, you know what? I need to kind of be able to do something different for our community, because yes, I'm here in my classroom touching these babies, but there's a broader base. So I started to pursue administration. So I pursued administration after teaching 3-4 years in the classroom, became an assistant principal, and then a principal. And my thing was, and it's still my thing, if I wouldn't put my kids in your classroom, there's a problem.
Right. It's real. You know what? It's like, Portia, we just spoke offline about an interesting set of circumstances that I went through yesterday. And when you say these Title I schools are urban schools, predominantly Black, but they're not taught by people that look like us, I myself was a product of the parochial school system in New York. And, as you know, most of my teachers were not of African-American descent. You know what I mean? Most of them were of European descent. So yesterday, I actually was I was putting up a podcast, as I do on social media, and our high school has we have a platform that we still, talk and mingle amongst one another. You know what I mean? As I alluded to when we spoke to, I went to St. Raymond's, and then after St. Raymond's, actually, I went to St. Helena Commercial High School.
Wow.
I didn't graduate from St. Raymond's. I went to St. Helena's, and that's on the same campus as Monsignor Scanlon. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Right. So on the same campus. Now, so I put up my podcast, and about after 2 hours, I see that I got a notification from a former classmate. So I go on there and I look and see what's going on. Some person of European descent demands that I take my podcast down from the platform. Demands, not ask, demands. Says to me, hey, this is our platform. I don't think she meant our as in me and her. Okay. She said, this is our platform. Remove this ASAP. And I said, woo, that's kind of, I don't know, racist, if you will. Straight up. So my classmate spoke on my behalf, letting her know, hey, this guy is an alum of St. Helena's. You understand? And he's here to voice his opinion and his commentary on the senseless murder of Dante Wright, which the podcast was named. And basically, she had my back until I got there. So when I got there, I was like, hey, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. You held me down for a minute. But now I'm going to take over. So I'm asking this lady, now, what's going on? What's the problem? So she tells me, she says, hey, this platform doesn't have to have hot topics on it. And we don't want hot topics on this platform. First and foremost, I'm like, hey, who the hell are you? Who made you in a position of power? Okay, first and foremost. And that is the same reason why these topics remain to be hot, because people like you want to keep them a secret. Okay. So it was a segue for me to let her know that I want her to read my book, Habitual Habitat, an Urban Sermon, which can be purchased on Amazon today. Read the chapter, specifically the process and procedure of propaganda, then come back to me and talk. All right. So after I gave her my little soliloquy, she started calling me Mr. Johnson. Okay. Then she wants to go on and say, hey, well, I taught at Monsignor Scanlon. I said, whoa. So this is my connection to what you were saying. You taught at Monsignor Scanlon? Oh, so you really feel like you are in a position of power to tell Black people what to do, because they allowed you this authority to teach in our school systems and teach our children. So I definitely understand what you're saying about it. It's kind of it's weird when our children are I would say taught by these certain people, and Black people such as ourselves. We actually need to become the educators and the principals of our own school system. So I'm assuming that's what you were feeling when you were the teacher. You was like, you know what? I have to come up in the ranks so I can have some type of authority, if you will, to make some decisions in the school system. Well, am I right?
I would dare say, instead of using the term authority,
right,
I would prefer advocacy.
Gotcha.
Because I find that our babies and even our parents don't have someone who looks like them,
Right.
to advocate for them, but also to teach them how to advocate, because
that's right.
We oftentimes are the anomaly. So it can't be just us and we're like, yes, this needs to be done, that needs to be done, this, but it needs to be a triad, a wraparound of supports. And sometimes our families don't know how to do that and what that looks like. So I'm very big on tools. And even though, even while I was a principal, I would say, hey, I hear what you're saying and your concerns are, and I agree with you. Let's come up with a plan of how to articulate what that looks like for our babies to move them forward. So
that's right.
I'm real big on that. I really, really am.
You know what I think is interesting though? We talk about how we need to raise our children because our children's not going to gain the knowledge that they need for us, about us. They're not going to gain that knowledge in school. So while we will be teaching our children, I also think it's very important that we teach white people too, because not all white people are against black people, whatever, but a lot of white people are a product of the same lack of information. So then
they've inherited racism.
They did. And whether it's unconscious bias or whatever you want to call it, it's still a lack of information. So a white teacher that's teaching in a black school, that white teacher also needs to be taught the culture and black history, not necessarily to the point where they need to try to attempt to appropriate it or anything like that, but that knowledge still needs to be there, because teachers love to teach, whether you're white or black, right? Like if you love children, you love to teach. And I'm saying that because one of my favorite teachers of all time was a white woman, and I loved the way she taught me. And she never shied away from teaching me the truth when it needed to be. And as ironic as it is, my love for African American history came from this white woman, which is crazy. That idea is crazy. I mean, sure, there was my parents and, of course, my granddad. That it sparked that when I was like 2 or 3 years old. But I'm talking about to really dive into the books and learn and read and research and all that stuff. It came from a white woman. But it was like she could only teach me so much because she was raised in a white family where she didn't know anything. So what she could teach me, what she could tell me was so very limited. So it's like, you know what I mean? I feel like y'all need to learn some stuff too. If you're going to be a teacher, if you're going to be in these schools, you're going to have to learn something.
That's right. I agree. Totally.
Dr. Adrian, you don't look like you agree.
Well, I mean, it's, go ahead, Dr. Adrian. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I agree to an extent because, I mean, I don't think that it's I don't think that should be one of the objectives. You know what I mean? I'm a proponent of, we've thought in that manner for way too long. You understand? We've thought like it's kind of like the slave that had to coddle the white children while master was beating them. You know what I'm saying? I'm raising your children and all that, but you're still you're still you're killing me.
Right.
You understand? You know what I mean? So I don't think that should be our objective. Where let's teach white. No. We got to make sure our backyards are clean first before we even think about what their backyards even look like. You understand?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because rest assured, every other culture does that first, straight up and down. And I think that's one of the problems that we have as a people is that, we are concerned. We are as I've said, we have the most empathetic people in the world. You understand? We will bend over backwards. We will take our shirts off for people and give people food. And these same people have the propensity to spit in our faces. You understand? When I think we should ascertain the spit is coming already and say, all right, you know what? Let me form my armor first. So if you do choose to spit at me, it's not going to affect me because I've already formed the armor and the shield to protect me from that mucus. Right. You understand? Yeah. if that was a good analogy, I apologize.
Yeah,
I'm serious. I mean, how do you feel about that, Dr. Adrian?
So let me go back to Miss Portia and what she was saying. I wholeheartedly agree. There have been some, I would say, a plethora of Caucasian educators that have come across my path
Absolutely.
at some juncture. However, comma, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know.
That's right. Well put.
And so for me, we say like it takes time to build. And I think because there is a cultural process of them knowing this is what they've been taught, this is what this is. So what does us teaching them look like?
Right.
And are they really receptive to that?
Right.
Because then it's a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It's a whole paradigm shift and for me, my experience of having, and I will speak more recently, trying to have courageous conversations with people of the alternate race, because they will say, well, I don't know, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. I think down to someone saying that they gave an individual a ride home and they turned the radio station to a station that they thought that the African American person would want to listen to. And when the African American person said, I don't want to listen to that station, what would make you think? Well, I thought that would make you happy.
It's wow.
So where do we go with that? So it's so systematic and it's so deep that it's it takes layers and layers and layers. And yes, we can have courageous conversations. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. But I think that there are lots of biases that they come with.
Straight up.
That they're not comfortable. For me, I'm like, okay, let's sit down. You don't understand. Let me explain to you why without them being defensive.
Right. And that's going to be almost impossible. That's almost impossible.
I don't think we can teach them. You can't teach someone that doesn't want to be taught. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You can't teach somebody who doesn't want to be kept. And so when you look at your environments and what these babies need, what these parents need, what this community needs, what these stakeholders need, it is almost, we have to have conversation and we all have to be on the same page.
That's right. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And that's a process. That's a process. So no fault to them for their lack of knowledge.
No,
however, comma, don't look at us sideways when we say, hey, these are some steps to move us into this direction so that you can understand, but yet our babies can benefit from it because X, Y, Z.
Right.
Question.
I'm done. Sorry.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Because I mean, like a million things is going through my mind. Real quick, Portia. I don't mean to cut you off, young lady. As a former principal and as educator, how do you feel about Black people that have the notion that we should only teach our Black children and they are proponents of homeschooling just to keep them out of the way of the public school system? How do you feel about Black people homeschooling their children and saying, you know what? A white person cannot teach my child. I feel like Black people can only teach my child. Therefore, I'm going to homeschool. How do you feel about that notion?
I'm going to go back and yield to what Ms. Portia was referencing about a lot of the information that she yielded was from a Caucasian woman.
Right.
Okay. So for me, it's not about, okay, this person is white or Black, because I'm just going to be very transparent with you here in this sector, because I think we talked about that, Mr. Johnson. That's the only way I know how to be. Yes. There are some African-American educators that I would say, I wouldn't put my child in your room.
Got you.
So for me, it's about the knowledge base. It's about the relationships. It's about the cultural understanding and what you're bringing to the table versus, okay, so you're white. No, you don't need to teach my child. And because you're Black, yes, you should teach my child. No, sir. There have been a variety of African-American educators during my tenure as an administrator. And I would go and I'd be like, what are you doing here? Because I don't know that people realize that research says if you have a poor teacher for 3 years, you therefore would need to have a good teacher for 6 consecutive years in a row.
Wow. Oh man.